Hello, welcome back everyone. I think there's one or two people still out there, but they'll be making their way back in. Now the next presentation, we've got Nigel Titley, who's going to give his usual right policy update. He wasn't able to be here in person, but we've got a little pre-record that we did earlier this week. And we'll have that, and then we'll go on to our sponsor presentation from LINX117, and that's Ken McIntyre, and that will follow straight after. So if you can play the video, please.
So, good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I won't be at the meeting in person. I will be in France. I should have connectivity, but just in case, we're going to record this and just to make it a little bit easier and more predictable. So off we go. This is my usual presentation on RIPE current policy, and let's kick off. Okay, RIPE policy proposals. I'm just looking at RIPE policy proposals. I'm not looking at the rest of the world, although that might be interesting for some of you. RIPE NCC, well, RIPE rather, the RIPE region is the one that most directly impinges on people. So let's see how the policy development process has fared over the past few years. As you can see, just before COVID, it peaked, and then gradually over the COVID years it dropped, 2020 and 2021, and it started to crawl up again. So it's interesting really, because you would think when people were at home with nothing much else to do, they might well have taken the time in doing some policy development, but this apparently didn't happen, which is quite interesting. Okay, there are only two policies open for discussion in the RIPE region at the moment. There's the 2022-02, which is to remove mandatory IPv4 PA assignment registration, and also the review phase for 2022-01, which is personal data in the RIPE database. So let's look at the first one of these first. So 2022-02, remove mandatory IPv4 PA assignment registration. As you all know, at the moment, you actually have to register all PA assignments, that's assignments mostly to your customers, in the RIPE database. This proposal is to remove that requirement. And you might ask why. And the reason is, of course, is that the RIPE NCC has no more IPv4 addresses to hand out. Therefore, the documentation of the use of those addresses, which was primarily used, of course, to determine whether you had used your PA assigned address space, is no longer necessary. So this is a proposal to remove this. It's in the discussion phase at the moment. If it gets adopted, then it means that you will no longer have to register IPv4 PA assignments. You can, of course, continue to optionally register those if you wish, but and it might be useful for documentation purposes, but you won't actually have to. It won't be mandatory. As I say, this particular policy is in the discussion phase. If you're interested in discussing it, then go to the Address Policy Working Group mailing list and follow up there. The second policy is 2022-01, which is a bit further along the line. It's in the review phase. This covers, or this is to do with, personal data in the RIPE database. Now, personal data is stuff like addresses, personal phone numbers, personal addresses, and personal names. And in the early days of the RIPE database, mostly address spaces were registered to personal names. Okay, there are many person objects in the database, and this causes a little bit of a problem with GDPR, because this personal data is, strictly speaking, comes under GDPR, and in many cases there is no recorded permission to use this data. Now, over the last few years, it's been good practice to actually move away from using person objects to using organizational role objects. And really, you should be storing all of your contact information as organizational roles. However, there are still an awful lot of person objects. And this policy is designed to try and either remove those objects or to make sure that personal data, each item of personal data actually has a permission to use it. Now, there are an awful lot of person objects in the database, and a lot of them are obsolete, of course, but some of them are still alive and still in use. And if this policy actually comes into full operation, it's an awful lot of work for the RIPE NCC staff to chase this up and to put it right. They reckon on at least a year or 2 years work full time on trying to get these person objects chased up and registered. So this is actually a commercial decision that's really having to having to take place. And if you think that it isn't necessary, or that it is too much trouble or whatever, then you really ought to be taking part in the discussion about this particular policy process. As far as I can see, there is no way in which we can avoid it, because GDPR requires us to make sure that all objects are actually given permission to be used. But I would advise you to, or encourage you to go to the database working group mailing list and check on the discussion for this particular project, this particular policy. This one is now in the review phase, so it's pretty well along the lines of being adopted. As I say, you may not be interested, you may be interested, but in any case, make sure you're properly informed. And here is just a diagram of where these policies are. As you can see, 2202 is open for discussion, well, until 2nd of November. So that's in the initial discussion phase still, and it's will be by now, of course, into the comment and review phase. And the 2022-01, which is the personal data in the RIPE database, is into the comment and review phase. Well, no, actually, it's now into the comment phase. So really, if you want to comment on this one, you ought to be looking at this one as well and commenting on it in the database working group email list. There have also been a couple of changes in the policy development process itself. Again, have a look at these documents. They're actually now in place. There's a slight change in the appeals process for policy development process, and there is also now a RIPE code of conduct fully in place and all working. Again, you may want to look at these, okay? If you go to RIPE meetings or if you comment on mailing lists, you will definitely want to look at the RIPE code of conduct. And obviously, all of the working groups have mailing lists, which can be got at the URL below. Right, here's a list of URLs if you're interested in policy in other regions. It can be quite interesting to have a look and see at how the rest of the world is doing these things, although very often there's no direct impingement on the RIPE region. But there's the URLs if you're interested. And finally, questions. Obviously, I can't take questions because this is a recording, but the Policy Development Officer at RIPE.net, Angela, is actually very, very helpful and will be delighted to answer any questions directly that you may have. Thanks very much, and have a lovely rest of the meeting. Bye-bye.